This is a story about a really defining moment in my life. It was just before I turned goth, but it was the moment that I realized that I was not normal, that I was different. And it took me dating my very last normie guy to help facilitate a moment that would change the entire course of my life forever. Now, I was weird my whole life. I was a weird kid. I was a weird preteen. I was a weird adult, but I didn't know that until much later. I just thought that the other kids were mean. I was extroverted and I wanted to associate with my peers, and it was not through lack of trying, but it was through their lack of wanting anything to do with me. And I'd always been relegated to the lowest possible rung of social society, and I never quite understood why. And every time I opened my mouth, kids would look at me like I was nuts. And I didn't understand it. So I was born and raised on the cusp of Queens. I went to school in Long Island, but I went and got pizza 2 blocks away in Queens. So it's debatable as to where the heck I grew up. But this is the area of the world that I was born and raised. When I was 10, we moved to Florida. And I was there from 10 to 14. Now, these were very formative years because this is where I became a teenager. This is where I went through puberty. This is where your personality starts to develop and you start to become the person that you are going to be later in life. So I started junior high school there, and hoping for a kind of fresh start, it wasn't any different because I was still seen as peculiar, as abnormal, and I didn't understand why. I didn't have any of the defining features that would make me stand out in such a way to make me a social outcast. I didn't have these big, thick glasses that made my eyes look massive. I didn't have braces that were so huge that my mouth couldn't close. I didn't have an obsession with bugs to the point where it dominated my personality and I wore bug-themed clothes all the time. I didn't have anything like that to where very cruel and judgmental kids could cling to and say, "You're an outcast, this is why." I didn't understand what about me was not translating and what about me they found so undesirable and why I was just so uncool. Now, since I was relegated to the lower possible class of society, that meant that these other kids that were my friends. And you know what? I could not have asked for better friends. They were the coolest kids ever. But every time I would open my mouth in junior high school, I would get looked at like, "Why are you like this?" And it wouldn't be anything particularly abnormal. I mean, I would say what was on my mind. And for example, I would think, you know what would be really weird if snakes had fur? So I would say that. This would get me looked at by my peers like I was insane. And they would say, "Why are you like this?" And then I'd really have to start thinking about it and analyzing it. And I'd analyze what I said, and I don't know. I guess there must be something wrong with me because you know how affected we are by our peers when we're younger. So I immediately thought, well, there's something wrong with me. So my once extroverted personality became a very introverted personality, and I very fast became insecure. I found myself speaking very minimally, and when I did, I was mirroring the behaviors of other people. I knew that something that I was saying or the way that I was saying it, there was something about my personality that made them hate me. So therefore, in order for them to like me, to be deemed normal, I needed to mirror their behavior. And I became very inauthentic, but it didn't work. Because it was either my weirdness shone through, or it made my weirdness worse, or it's one of those things where the moment you're branded something in school, it sticks with you for life. Beginning to think it was that one. So I turned 14, and my parents decide that they want to leave Florida now. They want to move back to New York. So we did. We moved back to New York, and it was a particularly nerve-wracking time because I not only was going to be starting school in a new state, but I was starting high school. This was going to be my very first year of high school. Now, I'm a person who was very introverted and also very insecure, and I didn't like to be the center of attention at all. And being the new kid at a new school in a new state, that's a big spotlight that I did not want. So literally, the day that we're moving in, up comes the girl from across the street. Her name was Dawn, the very first person I met when I moved to New York to welcome me to the neighborhood. And I found out that she did not want to come over at all, but her mother forced her. She's like, "Damn it, Dawn, you're going to go there. They have a daughter your age. You go say hello." She didn't want to come because I was what was deemed by 90 standards a fluff. And what a fluff was a term used to describe very, I guess, high maintenance girls or normal girls who wore makeup, did their hair, dressed up, and that kind of thing. And Dawn was what I had associated with a headbanger, but she quickly corrected me and said, no, I'm a freak. And I said, cool. Something that I noticed almost instantaneously from being around Dawn is that I wasn't guarded, and I wasn't finding myself wanting to censor the things that I wanted to say, which after my experience in junior high school, I naturally was very guarded, and I would censor myself to the point where I wasn't really saying much of anything at all. And when I did, it wasn't what I wanted to say, out of fear of being judged and deemed awkward or weird or peculiar. And I wasn't doing any of those things because she was saying and doing and behaving in the ways that I wanted to. And it felt very natural and very normal, and I felt that guard come down. And she was very extroverted in a sense where, being a freak, anything normal as a teenager, they would scream and kind of dramatically throw themselves to the floor in the face of, like, for example, her mother would show her like a picture of New Kids on the Block or something, and she would throw her hands over her face and go, oh my God, it burns my eyes, and throw herself to the floor. And I was both shocked and exhilarated. I was like, wow, yeah, it does burn. And I quickly came to the realization that, maybe the reason that I was always so discounted and treated in the way that I was because of my personality wasn't because there's anything wrong with me. It's because I was a New Yorker. Here I am, I'm a New Yorker. I was in Florida. I was just a fish out of water. They didn't understand me. They didn't get my personality because I wasn't in my natural environment. The reason that I understand her so well and the reason that I feel so comfortable is because she's a New Yorker too. Things are going to be great. So she asks me if I want to go to this club called The Shop. And The Shop was an alternative club that catered to all of Long Island's alternative kids from ages like 12 to like 18 or 19, I don't know. Just a bunch of kids. And it was open every Sunday when there was no school on Monday, and every single Sunday during the summertime. Well, it was the summertime. And school wouldn't start until September, so we had July and August to really go nuts at this place, and we did. So my very first time there, it really hit the nail on the head for me. I was like, wow, okay. So it is New Yorkers that jive with my personality, because here I am amongst hundreds upon hundreds of teenagers, my peers from New York, alternative kids, mind you, but I didn't put two and two together, alternative kids, and they have the same exact personality as me. They're quirky, they're extroverted, they're doing and saying the things that are on their mind. They think it, they say it. And I felt like I was amongst, finally, people where I could be myself. Dawn introduced me to all of her friends, and I was quickly ingratiated amongst them, which felt great. And for the first time in my life, I felt very accepted. The interesting thing is, I still didn't really know who the hell I was yet. I was still dressing very much normal, and it was still the summertime. School had not started yet. I'd moved there in July, and we are kind of fast approaching September now. And every weekend we're going to The Shop, and I'm hanging out with Dawn and her friends, and she's making me mixtapes with like Nirvana and The Cure and Smashing Pumpkins, the Cranberries, and all of these different shoegaze bands, and I'm loving it. And I'm not quite sure who I am, but I know I still have this instinctive need to keep up appearances because I know that this is the kind of way that I have to be. I don't know really any other way. I was held back a year in school. So even though Dawn and I were only a year apart in age, she was a year older than me, grade-wise, she was 2 years older than me, therefore we were not going to be in the same school. So we had Sachem North and Sachem South. I was going to Sachem South because that was 9th and 10th grade. Dawn was in Sachem North, which was 11th and 12th. So she and all of my friends that I had made and gotten close with that whole summer were in an entirely different school. So I was starting this new school where I knew no one, and I was still very much introverted. First day of school comes around, and the bus stop is about 1 block behind my house. So I walk to the bus stop, and as I'm walking up, I feel a knot in my stomach because there are 2 kids waiting there already. There's a guy and a girl, and it's 1994. So we don't have these things. And what I mean by this, there's none of this. Therefore, there's no buffer. There's nothing standing between me and them to kind of create that little barrier where I would feel less pressure from the situation. So the only thing I could do is either walk up and say nothing or walk up and say hi. So I walked up and I said hello. The boy, he immediately said hello back. He was very nice. The girl rolled her eyes and turned her back, physically, in a physical display of I do not like you, turns her back and faces the other way. Not off to a very good start. And I'm thinking, I don't know this girl. I've never met her before in my life. And there's another story that I'm going to tell that's actually going to begin at this moment. But we're just going to leave that there. So this was before I even got to school, before I even got on the bus. We're not off to a good start. So I get to school, and I still kind of have that mindset to where I'm amongst New Yorkers now, and they're more in line with my own personality. Therefore, I don't have to be as guarded. I can be myself. That immediately changed the moment I walked through those doors. I was surrounded by people who were of the same temperament as everyone in junior high school, keeping up appearances. The same type of conversations were happening, very vapid, surface level stuff. Football, clothes, makeup, hanging out, parties, drinking, that kind of thing, which was night and day comparatively to what I'd experienced with Dawn and the new friends that I made at the shop with all the other freaks. Mind you, I'm in normal clothes because, again, I still have this inherent need to want to blend into the background and dress very muted. I was very neutral in earth tones, and I didn't want to stand out. I didn't like standing out. My first few weeks of school turned out to be very active weeks because a lot had happened. I had made 2 new friends. They were freaks as well, and they had that same temperament and personality to where I didn't feel like I needed to guard myself the way I had to guard myself around other people for fear of being looked at like I was nuts, because they really did look at me like I was crazy. But everything that I would say and the way that I would behave was completely in line with my 2 new friends, Jen and Elena, who had became my best friends all throughout school and for some time after school for a bit. So also in those few weeks, there was a boy who took an interest in me. His name was Rich. And he reminded me of Christian from the movie Clueless, except for the blue eyes. But other than that, he looked just like him. But he was really nice to me. And that is really important. I didn't feel judged, and he was just genuinely nice to me. So he took an interest in me. And I think we were in one class together, and he wanted to exchange phone numbers, so we did. Unfortunately, Rich had a kind of stalker situation, but he had a girl who had a crush on him since junior high school, but he had no interest in. But she had a habit of harassing and bullying the absolute hell out of any girl that he showed any sort of interest in. So the moment this became apparent to her, she was basically meeting me at my classes. She learned my schedule, meeting me at my classes. This is the first 2 weeks of school. And as bullies go, they never act alone. They have an army around them. They will never do things by themselves because bullies are cowards. So she and at least 3 friends in tow would show up at my class, say nasty things to me, threaten to hit me, tell me to stay away from Rich. It had gotten to the point where I had told Rich that, listen, you come with a lot of baggage that I am really not equipped to deal with. And he assured me that he was going to get her to stop. Didn't stop. After a few weeks, he had asked me if I wanted to hang out at his house. He was going to have some friends over, and it was going to be on a Friday night, and asked if I wanted to come over, and I said, sure, why not? So I told my mother. She drops me off at his house. I walk in, and it becomes painfully clear that his parents aren't home. Stomach drops. And he ushers me into his bedroom. This is not a Netflix and chill kind of situation. There is no Netflix. This is a time where some people didn't even have cable TV in their house. So I went into his bedroom, and you do, I guess, what teenagers do. You make out and some over-the-clothes stuff or whatever. And so he ended up saying something to me to where I think about it today, and it makes my skin crawl. And it's just one of those kind of cringe moments where I'm like, oh, why did I do that? He says, and he puts it forth in such a way that's very judgmental and makes me feel as if I'm actually being a very rude and inconsiderate person. But he says, you can't come over here and make me all HARD and not do anything about it. And suddenly I'm thinking, you know what, that would be really rude of me. And I didn't want him to not like me. I didn't want him to hate me. I didn't want him to be mad at me. I didn't want him to go to school and say, this girl's a tease. She came to my house, and so stupid me did it. And almost immediately after, we hear a door open in the living room, and he freaks out and he's like, it's my mother, she's home, get in the closet now. So I'm like, hearts in my throat, I'm setting myself to rights. I run to his closet and I'm kind of trying to, situate myself. And I realize I can see out of my peripherals that I'm surrounded on 3 sides by what appears to be cave writing. So when I look, I can see that floor to ceiling, I'm looking at girls' names and telephone numbers. Hundreds of them. And I'm instantly hit with that, what the hell did I just do feeling? And I'm feeling instant regret. So I'm in there for maybe no more than 5 minutes. And then he comes back in and says, okay, you have to leave through my window. I'll be outside waiting for you. And we're going to go up the road. My friend lives on this street. He's my best friend. And I really want you to meet his mom. His mom is one of the coolest people. And I introduce all my girlfriends to her. Really not what I needed to hear. I jump out the window and I meet him outside and we go to his friend's house. Go to his friend's house, and actually the guy's mom is really, really nice. And I'm in this situation where I'm blocking again. I'm shielding. I'm very, very guarded, and I'm very cautious about the things that I'm saying because I don't want to seem like I'm weird. And I'm sure that behavior probably made me seem a lot weirder in hindsight, because when you're trying to hold it in, it probably makes you seem 10 times worse. But I called my mother, had her pick me up from his house and said, we're at another friend's house just down the street. You can pick me up here. And she did. So the bullying with the other girl it never stopped. And it got to the point where I just decided that I needed to get her alone. So I learned her bus route. And I found out exactly what bus stop she got off at. And I had my mom bring me there. And I waited for her to get off the bus because it needed to be handled one-on-one. That was it. Because when she is with her friends, she's got all of these balls, but I need to get her by herself and really hash it out. Like, either you tell me what the deal is, we work it out now, and you knock it off, or I'm kicking the shit out of you. Not a route I recommend that you go, but you have to bear in mind I'm 14 at the time. So I wait at her bus stop, and she never gets off because word got around of what I was doing. She never got on her bus, and she had her mom come pick her up from school because she knew that I was waiting there. So it never actually got squashed. Seemed like so much had happened, but that was just 1 month of school in the bag. First month done and dusted, and then October comes around, and my birthday is the first week of October, so I had all of my friends come over for a birthday party, and all my friends are the freaks. And when I am around them, I'm myself. I'm my true self. I'm not guarded. I'm not censoring myself. I'm just being myself. And Rich is also there. And I can see that it's made him visibly uncomfortable. And I had suddenly felt really judged, like the judgment that I would face in school from my peers by the kids who would immediately recoil or have something to say the moment I opened my mouth. That had forced me into being practically an introverted mute. So from that point on, things got a little bit weird, and I had confided in some friends that it's really clear that I was just being used physically because he's not interested in my personality. And I told them about the night in the closet with all the phone numbers on the wall. And as it's high school and as kids are 14 years old, there is no loyalty. And things get around, and they get around fast. So I went to school on Monday, and I remember the exact wing of the hallway that I was walking down of the school. And I swear that it's like this was planned and everyone knew but me. Walking down the hall, and kids are parting like the seas, and they're all looking at me, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And here comes Rich walking down the middle, and he goes, yo. And it took me aback. I was like, okay, well, that's a demeanor shift. I'm like, hi. And he says, what's this about bitches' numbers on my wall? And I went cold. I felt I was like a deer in headlights. I just froze. And he said, you know what you are? You're just another whore that I did. Worst thing that you could say in high school, because guess what reputation that gives you? And he's just going on and on. But he's just saying the same thing over and over. You're just another whore that I did. And everyone is looking at me. Now, mind you, I am a person that does not like attention. I was somebody who would be out of breath, rushing to class so fast because I didn't like to be one of the last ones to walk in, because I didn't want all eyes on me. I just wanted to get to my desk and just not have anyone look at me at all, let alone this whole situation, which my emotions took over. I start crying. I run to the nurse's office and I call my mother to pick me up. Picks me up, and my dad happened to be home from work that day. Told him what happened. Obviously leaving out the part where he said that I did. Just that he cornered me in front of the entire school, calling me a whore. So my father found out his bus route and waited for him at his bus stop, and I was mortified because I had no idea. I was so scared. I didn't know what he was going to tell my father. I didn't know what was going to happen to Rich. Actually, I didn't care, but I all I knew was I didn't want to go back to school at all. I did not want to return to school after all that. I was humiliated. My father came home, and instead of being consoling, considering what had happened to me that day, my father was visibly ashamed, angry with me, and disgusted. And he said, you know what he said to me? And I kind of didn't want to hear, but I just shook my head no. And he said, he told me that you're weird. He was quoting him and actually reenacting how Rich was almost pleading with him as if to defend himself by saying, your daughter's just really, really weird. And it was at that moment, it was like the curtain fell. And not only did my family know that I was weird all along, because hearing it, my father felt shame, hearing it from someone else that his kid is weird. And it's one thing to have the insecurity and think that, oh, people must be thinking these things about me, or they must feel this way about me. But it's another thing entirely when they say it out loud. And instead of feeling insecure about it, it was confirmation for me, and it almost freed me. Well, it did free me, because I realized who I was. I'm a freak, but not in a bad way. I was one of the freaks. Now, something that you need to understand about that time period is that standing out from the flock, deviating in any way from the norm, was not a good thing. And it was then, at the age of 14, where everything just finally made sense. I'm sitting here in a costume from The Gap, wearing clothes, trying to impress people and integrate with a group that I'm just not, that I'm not like. I'm listening to all the alternative music, and it's resonating with me deeply. And I'm connecting with these people who I'm not guarded around at all. I never felt guarded around them. I never felt like I had to pretend or even be introverted. I didn't feel judged. I felt like I was my true self for once in my life with them. So what I'm about to say, I don't want to get misconstrued, and I don't want to also deviate from the subject, because I know I often say goth is a music-based subculture, which I will fight you to the death on. It is. However, this is not what this video is about. What this video is about is, you know what, there really is a freak mentality as a collective. It's not that the temperament of anyone in alternative subcultures was any different today than it was back then. If you dared write poetry, put on a dog collar, and start listening to Skinny Puppy, your parents put you on medication, because that was not normal. Individuality was not a normal thing. We weren't afraid of public judgment or ridicule. We weren't afraid to be our truest selves, because sometimes it felt normal to have a pretend conversation with a tree because you felt like it. Sometimes you wanted to put a traffic cone on your head and run around and be a pretend wizard. These kinds of things, which normal society back then would have frowned upon, today it's just another day at the office for people. But back then, as a freak, if you thought it, you said it. And whereas it's not abnormal to have that kind of personality now, there's nothing wrong with speaking your mind or saying how you feel. That was not the norm back then. You could not say or do what felt normal. You couldn't dare talk about how your friend Rick tried to eat a cookie through his nose. No, you had to talk about surface level things. You had to talk about clothes and parties and school and football. And if you were not talking about these things, then there was something very wrong with you. And we realized that there was something very wrong with that mentality. Nobody likes public ridicule or embarrassment or anything like that, but it was that particular moment that made me realize who I was. Even though it did suck, but it made me realize that I'm not built for that world. Prior to that, I had tried so hard to integrate with the whole normie world, and every time I tried, they would just judge me and tell me that I was weird or make me feel like there was something wrong with me. And after the whole situation kind of come to fruition, it made me happy. Hearing it out loud, you would think that it would be that moment that would just make you want to recoil and just kind of disappear. But not for me. It made me incredibly happy because for the first time, I knew who I was. And I liked it. I liked my friends. I liked that I could be myself. I liked that I didn't have to restrict. I liked that I didn't have to hide anymore. I could be who I was. So mind you, this was October. I started school in September. I moved to New York in July. And from the moment I started school, I went from this to this. And for the first time, I felt safe being myself. I didn't have to hide anymore. I was amongst my people, and I never looked back. And then a month after that, I went to my first goth club, and then it was all over.